Late summer is one of my favorite times of year. The days are still long, the garden is overflowing, but there's a little whisper that fall is just around the corner. Even though I'm still holding on to summer, I'm starting to tuck away flavors for the colder months ahead. The first thing I want to do is make elderberry juice in my steam juicer. And isn't that the truth that the biggest clusters of elderberries are always the highest up where the birds can get them? I figured out how to get most of them, not all of them, and I'm cutting them right into my steamer basket because I found that that's the most efficient way, because those little elderberries roll off really easily and then I lose them all the way to the kitchen, and I want to preserve as much as I can. I don't know, maybe I'm a little hamster somewhere in a previous life to make sure I'm saving everything. Once the steamer is boiling, the steam will come up to the berries and extract all the juice that I'm canning right here. What I love about this type of homemaking is that it just so connects me to my roots. I still have pictures, images in my head of sitting at my grandparents' house in the middle of winter, sipping on a hot cup of steaming elderberry juice. I also want to make some butter because we still get our raw milk and it's not pasteurized or homogenized, and the cream separates up on top. I add buttermilk to the cream and let that sit out at room temperature until it's solidified. Usually it takes about 2 days. And then I keep the sour cream, which is actually real sour cream, in the refrigerator until I'm ready to make butter. And usually I try to save a few jars to make it really worth my while. Among the few methods that I've tried, I find that using my KitchenAid stand mixer is probably the easiest and most efficient, and the cleanup is better, and it just kind of sits quietly in the corner and does its thing. Thinking that people used to do this by hand, this is so easy to just have the machine going, and I love looking at when the fat, the butter, separates from the whey. Again, here's me being a little hamster, not wanting to waste any of the precious butter that sits on the whisk. I also like to save the buttermilk, and I haven't really found the best way to put it through a colander, but this is the buttermilk that I remember from when we were in Austria hiking on really high alpine huts, and when you went into those little, what do we call them, pubs, you could ask for a glass of fresh made buttermilk, and it would be like this with just little specks of butter in it. I also like to wash the butter. This is really important to make it last as long as possible. And because it is raw butter, I'm a little picky about what water I use, and I like to use my filtered water because then it doesn't have the chlorine or whatever chlorine product they're putting in tap water that might potentially kill off any of the beneficial bacteria that I like to cultivate and keep in my raw milk. And then I simply drain it. This is, again, another process that I just so enjoy doing because I don't know, this puts me in a meditative state. It allows me to do something with my hands. It's repetitive, it's soothing, and I love the creativity and just being able to make something that is useful, that we can put on our table and that we know is healthy. We know exactly where the food came from. We know the cows. We know where the cows live and how they live and all the rest of it, which I think makes this food taste even so much better, even if I bought the same quality from a store. I want to save it in the refrigerator, and you can make pretty nice designs or just keep it really practical and easy and put it in a block, wrap it in some parchment paper, and keep it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. In between my activities, I like to ride horses, and this is one of the gentle giants that I ride. Now that I'm done riding, I'm gonna head to my favorite place to get apples, and I'm all sweaty and red looking in my face because it's a common misconception that only the horse is working when you're riding. It's actually, you're using a lot of muscles while you're riding, so that's why it makes you get out of breath. Let's see what apples we can find. Well, they do have apples and plums. Every year I wait for this place to pop up. It's just a little driveway from a little house. And I love their honor system because I know exactly where the apples come from. I love that I can just pick and choose and pay with Venmo. This is a new thing this year. I love how sometimes you mix old-fashioned ways with modern achievements, and Venmo is just one of them. They would be 3 times as much in the store, and that is why I love this so much. I am going to use them to make canned apple pie filling because there's all these apples that I want to use for the rest of the year. And one of the best ways to preserve them is to make canned apple pie filling. It allows me to can them, and then whenever in the winter or in the fall I'm ready to bake some apple pie, I already have it right there. Because non-commercial varieties tend to not have been bred. That was a long way to say what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is they do get brown really easily, which is why I create some lemon water and I cut my apple pieces directly into the lemon water to keep them from browning. Ultimately, if you add a lot of cinnamon, you will still get brown apples, but I like to keep them from browning. I also love to save the apple peels and cores because I'm going to make apple scrap vinegar from it, which is another really easy way to cut down on waste and make good use of something that otherwise would just end up in not the landfill, but the compost. And it is so easy to make that. Then I store it in the freezer until I'm ready to actually make the apple core vinegar. I like to add some sugar. Sugar preserves the canned apple pie filling, and you can totally adjust it to your sweetness. I like to add a little bit more because of my personal canning practices that have been brought down by generations in Europe. I am going to leave a link for a video below in which I talk about my canning practices. Once the apples are cooked to the kind of softness that I want, and I don't want them super mushy because then they just hold up better in pies and cakes and forever else I'm using this apple pie filling, I am going to be ready to can them. And I have my cans over there. They are ready. They're not sterilized, but they're just really washed in hot water. And again, this is just how I can. And I always urge people to do their own research and follow their own practices that they feel safe with and that they feel is best for their family. Another thing that comes with this kind of homemaking and preserving harvest for the colder months is that your house smells like apple pie filling. And yes, you can have candles, scented candles, or essential oils wafting these scents through the house, but why not make something and have your house smell like apple pie filling? It is a lingering smell that I just love so much, and it's just reminding me of cozy, warm, cuddly days ahead, and it's also a very grounding. Cinnamon is a very grounding spice, and it just makes me feel grounded and connected to the rhythms of nature. Elderberry juice is a little bit different from syrup, but you can just drink it straight from the jar. And I decided I have a jar of cherry jam with just regular good ingredients, but it was a little sweet for our taste. And this is something that I do often in my kitchen, and that has served me mostly well. I mean, there's the occasional failure or experiment that didn't go the way I wanted, but most of the time I'm rewarded with the kind of successes that I'm looking for. My idea here is because elderberry juice can have a bit of a tart flavor that not everybody absolutely loves, and just adding sugar to it just makes it sweeter, but it keeps the tartness. So my idea was if I mix it with this cherry jam, then maybe I get a good combination of flavors, a good marriage of flavors, if you will, and the sweetness and the distinct flavor of the cherries might actually add to the elderberry taste and enhance it. And to get the last bit out of the cherry jam out of the jar, I'm just pouring some hot elderberry juice in there, swirl it around, and pour it back in. Like I said, maybe I was a hamster in a previous life, or a chipmunk, or what are those animals called that store food for later and can't get enough of it? I sometimes have that in myself where I feel like I just cannot pass by on anything that's out there. I do add some citric acid simply because it preserves it a little bit better, and it adds just that little tart, sour, very faint sour taste to it that makes the taste a little bit more interesting. And my pectin, I like to use no or low sugar pectin because then it can decrease the amount of sugar in my final product. I do have some lemons from my own garden, and they have so many seeds, and this is an attempt to save the seeds and not let them slip into there. But even if the seeds fall in there, they're actually really healthy. They contain really good oils, so I'm not super worried about it. One really old-fashioned way to test your jam for doneness is to do the gel test in a little dish, and you just look at it, and if it starts forming a skin and almost wanting to move around like a teardrop, then you know it is done. And this, again, I'm just using very clean jars straight from the dishwasher, and I put them on a cutting board so that that you don't chalk the glass and then it actually cracks while you're adding the piping hot juice. This is another thing. And you want to fill the jar probably about 1/4 inch to the top to make sure that there's not enough of air in there that can spoil. And I'm so surprised I'm actually getting 5 jars out of this cherry elderberry jam, and I cannot wait to taste it. It tastes a little bit different when it's still hot because you know how temperature affects the sweetness of any product. So I can't wait to taste it and to see if it actually gelled the way I want it to. For another project tomorrow, I'm starting my sourdough starter. I have a little bit of rye in there. This is why it looks so marbled. A rye sourdough starter on top of my white wheat sourdough starter. And if you know anything about me, you know that I barely ever measure. I go mostly by consistency. And if I measure it, I would probably get the same consistency, so I can actually reverse the process and just look at it. And sometimes I like a stiffer starter, but this is exactly, this is exactly what I'm going for. And I'm going to let it sit that overnight because in the morning I want to bake some bread. And yes, I am going to put some of my skin's microbiome, little bacteria in my sourdough starter because I think it actually helps it. Saving tomato seeds is another thing that I like to do because the idea is that you save the seeds of the tomatoes that grow particularly well in your microclimate. And the practice couldn't be simpler. You just take some paper towels, squeeze some seeds on them, and it doesn't matter if you get some juice on there because I'll be letting those dry in the windowsill until they're completely dried. And then next year you can plant those seeds, and then you grow the kind of tomatoes that grow really well in your garden and in your microclimate. And I set them out in the windowsill, and when they're completely dry, I scoop them up, and then I will put them in little seed packets and save them for next year. That night my heart is full, and I love listening to the great horned owl in the background. I hope you can hear it, and I'm going to bed knowing that I am putting really good food on my family's table. One of my morning joys is a hot cup of coffee first thing that I make in my French press, and with my raw milk that we get from the local cows. And this is just my moment of quiet and peace and meditation and starting the day with just some collagen peptide powder that I add to the cup of coffee, and I love looking at how it dissolves and disappears in there because it is completely tasteless and odorless. My sourdough starter was very happy and overflowing, and look at all the big bubbles here. It's going to be perfect for the bread I'll be baking because I'm always recipe testing and trying out something new, like this bread that was completely great in flavor and amazing in the crust, but the shape disappeared when I tried to transfer it from my proofing basket into my Dutch oven. And so I'm going to have to make that recipe one more time. But this is the bread. This is my German breakfast that I'm having all the time. Homemade bread, homemade butter, and homemade jam. It doesn't get better than this. Thank you so much for following along. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Give me a like and a subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.